I run that trail every Saturday morning, have for about 2 years. Same path, same time, nobody else ever out there. So I noticed the dirt, a small mound of it, right at the base of a big pine maybe 20 feet off the path. I thought it was an animal. The next Saturday was bigger. The one after that, bigger still. The 8th Saturday, the dirt was gone. Someone was standing there instead. I started running that trail in the spring of last year. It's a forest preserve about 15 minutes from my apartment, not one of the popular ones with the paved paths and the parking lot full of cars on weekends. This one had a gravel lot with space for maybe 8 vehicles and a single trail that wound through about 4 miles of second-growth woods before looping back. On a good day, I'd pass 1 or 2 other runners. Most Saturdays, I passed nobody at all. That suited me fine. I wasn't a social runner. I went out to think, or to not think, and the emptiness of the trail helped with both. I'd learned the path well enough that I didn't need to watch my footing much any. I knew where the roots crossed the trail, where the trail dipped low and got muddy after rain, where the canopy opened up and let the light through, and where it closed back down into shade. I had landmarks the way you do when you walk the same path enough times. A split oak about a mile in, a creek crossing with loose stepping stones at mile 2, a cluster of white birch near the 3-mile mark that looked strange and pale in the early morning light, and a big pine, probably 60 feet tall, standing about 20 feet off the right side of the trail somewhere between miles 2 and 3. I'd noticed it the first few weeks because it was the largest tree in that section, wide enough at the base that you couldn't see around it. After a while I stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing anything familiar. That fall, I started noticing it again. The first Saturday, I was on my way back. The loop brought me past the same section going in the opposite direction when something at the base of the tree caught my eye. A small mound of fresh dirt, maybe the size of a dinner plate, slightly raised. I slowed down for a second and looked at it. The soil was dark and loose, clearly recently disturbed, different from the leaf-packed ground around it. I thought, animal, squirrel caching something, mole pushing up from underground, something burrowing. I kept running. Second Saturday, same spot. Bigger, not dramatically, but noticeably, the mound had spread and the center was slightly higher. Still looked like an animal thing. I crouched down and looked at it for a moment. No obvious tunnel entrance. No tracks in the soft dirt that I could read clearly. I stood back up and kept going. Third Saturday, bigger still. I stopped this time and took a photo on my phone, just to have a record. Something about the progression was starting to bother me in a way I couldn't articulate yet. The mound was maybe 18 inches across now, a few inches high at the center. The dirt was fresh again, like it had been turned recently. Whatever was causing it wasn't stopping. I went home and looked up burrowing animals in the region for about 10 minutes and found nothing that matched the size or the pattern. Then I told myself I was overthinking it and went about my weekend. I kept going back every Saturday. The mound kept growing. By the 6th week it was close to 3 feet across, dark and damp and clearly active. I started stopping to look at it each time. I don't know exactly when it stopped feeling like a nature thing and started feeling like something else. Somewhere around week 5, maybe, when I noticed there were never any animal tracks in the soft soil around. Something was disturbing that ground every week, and it wasn't leaving prints. The 7th Saturday I brought a stick with me. Before I left the mound on my way out, I pressed the stick into the center of the dirt at an angle, marking it so I could tell if anything changed between my outbound pass and my return loop. About 45 minutes later, coming back the other direction, I slowed as I approached the tree. The stick was gone, not fallen over, gone. The hole where I'd pressed it in was still there, a small circular depression in the center of the mound, but the stick itself had been removed and there was no sign of it nearby. I stood on the trail for a moment and looked around. The woods were quiet in the way they usually were at 7 in the morning, birds in the canopy, wind in the upper branches, nothing at ground level. I walked a slow circle around the tree, looking for the stick and not finding it. I gave up and went back to my car and sat there for longer than I should have before driving. That was when I started paying attention to other things. I went back the following Saturday, week 8, and I want to be clear that by this point I was genuinely curious rather than scared. I told myself there was an explanation. I thought maybe it was someone doing something with the tree, some kind of forestry thing, and maybe the stick removal was just someone clearing the area. I wanted to see the mound again with fresh eyes and in daylight and reassure myself that whatever this was, it was boring and explainable. I came around the bend in the trail toward the pine and I stopped. The mound was gone. The ground at the base of the tree was flat, not just smoothed out, flat and compressed, like it had been packed down deliberately. No loose dirt, no raised center, no trace of the 6 weeks of accumulation I had been watching. Just ground, and someone was standing next to the tree. A man, dark jacket, standing with his back partially against the trunk, facing the trail. Not moving, just standing there. He was maybe 40 feet from where I'd stopped, far enough that I couldn't make out his face clearly, close enough to see that he was looking directly at me. I raised a hand, a half wave, the reflex you have when you make eye contact with someone on an empty trail. He didn't wave back. He didn't move at all. He just stood there and looked at me. I started running again, not fast, just resumed my pace, kept my eyes on the trail ahead. I told myself, a person, just a person standing in the woods. That's allowed. People stand in woods. But I looked back twice before the trail curved and he disappeared from view. Both times he was in the same position, watching me go. I finished the loop faster than usual and got to my car. I sat there and thought about it. The mound being gone was stranger than the man in some ways. 6 weeks of accumulating dirt, just packed flat overnight, and then someone standing exactly where it had been at 7 in the morning on a trail where I almost never saw anyone. I went back the next Saturday. I told myself I probably wouldn't see him again. I almost didn't go, and then I went anyway. The mound was back, smaller than it had gotten, back to the size it was around week 2 or 3, but there, fresh, dark, recently turned. I stood at the edge of the trail and looked at it for a long time. I looked around the tree. On the far side, in the soft dirt between 2 roots, there were impressions. Not clear footprints, just a compressed outline of something that had stood there. The shape was consistent with 2 feet, placed close together, facing the trail. Someone had been standing behind the tree. I thought about the 8 weeks of Saturday mornings. I thought about running the same trail at the same time every week for 2 years. I thought about what that would look like to someone who was paying attention. A perfectly predictable schedule, a solo runner, an isolated stretch of trail, no other people within earshot. I thought about the stick being removed. I didn't finish the loop. I turned around and walked back to the car. I drove home and I sat with all of it. I went back one more time. I don't know why. I think I needed to know if the mound would keep growing again or if it would disappear. I needed the pattern to do something I could understand. I was about a mile in, coming up on the section with the big pine, when I heard something behind me. Footsteps, soft, off the trail, somewhere in the trees to my left. I slowed down and looked. The woods were thick enough in that section that you couldn't see more than 20 or 30 feet in. I couldn't see anyone. I kept moving. The footsteps stopped. I got to the pine. The mound was there, bigger than it had been the week before, like it had picked up where it left off. I kept moving past it, faster now, not looking at it for long. The footsteps started again. Same side, same distance into the trees. I stopped completely. The footsteps stopped. I waited 15 seconds and then started running. Not jogging, running. The footsteps came back. I could hear them clearly, off the trail, paralleling me, keeping pace. I came around the bend and hit the straight section that led back toward the lot and I pushed hard. I didn't look into the trees. I didn't slow down until I could see my car through the gap in the tree line. The footsteps stopped somewhere behind me. I don't know exactly when. By the time I hit the lot, I couldn't hear them. I got in the car and locked the doors and sat there for a few minutes watching the trailhead. Nothing came out. No one appeared. The lot was empty except for my car. I drove home. I looked up the trail online that night and found the Forest Preserve's maintenance records through the county park's site. There was no documented work in that section in the fall. No tree removal, no erosion control, no soil disturbance listed in the maintenance logs. I filed a report with the county parks department, described the mound, the progression, the man I saw, the footsteps. The person I spoke to on the phone was polite and wrote it down. They said they'd asked the maintenance crew to take a look. A week later, I got an email saying they'd checked the area and found nothing of concern. I went back one final time in the middle of the week, on a Wednesday morning, when I knew the trail would be empty. I wasn't locked into a predictable schedule. I walked the path instead of running, slowly, and paid attention to everything. The mound was gone. The ground at the base of the tree was flat and packed again. The footprint impressions behind the roots on the far side of the trunk were still faintly visible in the dried soil. 2 compressed ovals, facing the trail, toes pointing out. I took photos. I have them on my phone still. They don't show much, honestly. Just dirt with some vague indentations. The kind of thing that probably wouldn't convince anyone of anything. The kind of thing that in the right light looks like nothing at all. I stopped running that trail in November. I told myself it was just a schedule change. There's another preserve farther from my apartment that I use now. More people on the trail, more noise. I run with headphones in, which I never used to do. I think about that trail more than I should. I think about the 7 weeks of Saturdays I ran past that mound and noticed it growing and came up with explanations for it. I think about how predictable I was. Same trail, same day, same time, for 2 years. Long enough for someone to know exactly what I did and when. I think about the stick. That one stays with me more than the mound, more than the man at the tree, more than the footsteps in the woods. Whoever took it had been watching me put it. They came back to remove it before I could return and find it undisturbed. That wasn't an accident or a coincidence. That was a decision. I don't know what they were doing with that ground. I don't know what they were waiting for. I don't know if they're still going there on Saturdays.